So today we're having an exciting session which is titled Who Are We in the Digital Age? And what we're taking a look at is a reimagination of identity for everyone. We've got a great set of panelists around us who are going to give us a sense of what digital ID could mean, could do, and the impact that good digital ID could have on the digital transformation of a country. So help me to welcome our panelists. Firstly, I'm going to welcome Prof. Raja Gopalan, who is the president of MOSIP, OpenG2P, and course at Triple ITB in Bangalore, India. Prof, welcome. I also welcome Boy Kalamatila, who is the Director of Standards and Compliance at the Smart Zambia Institute, where it's a pleasure to have you with us here. And last and certainly not least is Vimbai Nashe Tsododo, who is the Managing Director of Tuso Business Dynamics, and they're doing incredible work across the digital transformation in Zambia. This session and these panelists whom you've met will clarify the distinction between foundational and functional ID. They'll explore open source digital ID solutions, and they'll discuss Zambia's opportunities and challenges in terms of building secure and inclusive digital ID. Let's get the ball rolling, and Prof, I'm coming to you. I know the first thing that people would want to hear is how we can set the pace, get definitions in terms of what this foundational and functional ID is, and examples of good ID. Prof, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jarikai. And I'm grateful to the organizers to have invited me to this panel discussion. Before I would even go to the differences between foundational ID and functional ID, let me ask a question, why ID at all? You know, I remember when I was school going 60 years ago, I didn't have an identity card in the school. Okay. When I got into my first job 50 years ago, none of us had any identity card. People trusted when you said, I am so and so, people trusted you. And there was no need to prove your identity. So the need for identity came from two directions. One direction is from people who were not fortunate enough to have the, let's say, privilege to be accepted by others. When I want to, let's say government has a benefit scheme, let's say it is providing food grains free of charge to poor people. And poor people will have to go there and say, I am so and so, I am poor, give me free food grain. Somebody has to accept that. So there is this power equation between people who demand or who is eligible for some facility, but who have to demand it, and people who provide that facility. So the question was, this power dynamics was always not favorable to people who are from remote areas, people who are poor, people who are illiterate, people who are women, disabled. They all had this access problem. Your access was mediated by an intermediary. So in order to provide inclusion and access, you needed a device to tell them that, okay, I am now have this document with me and I can demand my rights. So that is the one first motivation to have any kind of identity. Second motivation came from the other side, from the government. Government spending a fairly large amount of money on welfare programs for the citizens, old age pensions, scholarships to students, nutrition program. You name it, there are at least in any country, there would be close to 100 plus programs. Big countries like India has about 3,000 programs. Even Philippines, if you take one department, Department of Social Welfare and Development, DSWD, has 70 programs. So every country has so many programs providing benefits to people, and they would like these programs to be efficient, that the benefit reach only those who are targeted. benefits are not sidetracked by vested interests or corrupt people. So, famously, one of the former Indian prime ministers told about 45 years ago that he said out of $1 that government spends on welfare program, only 15 cents actually reach people, 85 cents gets diverted. So that is government's viewpoint saying that how do I make this efficient, leak proof, and reaches people whom it is meant for. So has to be some way of authenticating people who demand government benefit. So this need for authentication from the government side and the need for strongly asserting one's right to demand benefit, these two need coalesces into a single objective saying, how about I am having an verifiable ID, which is trusted by the government, trusted by everybody. So there is a question of verifiability, there is a question of trust. So that was the requirement, the impetus came to ID, and the continent of Africa was one of the forerunners in trying to give IDs to its people. Even in the first decade of this century, 2000 to 2010, quite a few countries in Africa had started ID programs to issue IDs to the people. Quite a few of them. Uh, and very many had started. So let me just go back a bit and then look at what is, why can't we use something else as ID? Like everybody has many documents. I have birth certificate if I am registering my birth from the CRVS system, Civil Registry and Vital Statistics Department. If I want to drive, I will go and take a driver's license. If I want to travel abroad, I go and get one passport made. So there are many documents I make for specific purpose. Why can't I just be using one of those documents? Why do I need a document called ID? Uh, if you really look at two important motivation for ID was one was for people to assert their right. Second was to government to authenticate, verify uniquely. This is very important, the word uniquely, so that there is no leakage and there is efficiency. Most of the functional IDs like passport, driving license, they all fail some of these tests of uniqueness because driving license have a validity period. After the validity period, it has to be renewed. But even when it is valid, if I move to some other state or some other region, I can get one more driving license. So that is the reason why, because that uniqueness is not verified in issuing of other IDs. And so the question of authentication is not 100% guaranteed trusted if you use found a functional IDs. There are many functional IDs people use but functional IDs are issued for a specific purpose maintained by that department. If you talk driving license is maintained by a transport department or a motor vehicle department. Passport is maintained by the external affairs or a foreign affairs department. So each of them have their own maintenance. It is not even by law usable across nationally. So you needed one digital ID which is purposeless. That means it is not created for any purpose, which also means it can be used for all purpose, multi-purpose, authenticable, verifiable, and people could demand it. And that is how the foundational ID came into being, and many countries have started adopting.
No, no, thank you so much for that, Prof. I think that really sets the pace, and thank you so much for setting that pace. I think there are a number of elements that you've raised that I think we can pick up during the course of the discussion. You talked about trust being an important aspect. You've mentioned verifiable. I think that's an important aspect that we also need to thread. Vimba, I'm coming to you next, and we've heard quite a bit from what Prof has shared. I read a statistic myself that says about 500 million people across Africa have no recognizable form of ID. But why should this matter? Why should all this matter for the citizens of Zambia and for Africa at large?
Thanks for that, Garikai. So at TUSO BD and IHM, part of our work, particularly in the last decade or so, has been within the health sector and providing an EHR both to the governments of Swaziland and the government of Zambia. And as Prof said, one of the challenges that we've faced is uniquely identifying clients in order to be able to provide service as well as continuity of care. As we go into the rural population, where predominantly most populations in Africa stay, access to services becomes a bit of a burden because we're unable to identify the citizens in that particular area. In urban areas, you tend to find, for example, once a child is born, they receive their birth certificate almost immediately, which allows them to access other services such as your passport, your driver's license, as you continue with life. But outward in the rural areas, because that doesn't happen for a number of reasons. Citizens don't have the required documents to then access basic services, which is their right. So, government can be doing a lot of work to bring these services to their citizens. And then you have this barrier that is driven by being unable to authenticate that particular citizen and therefore provide that service. And that's something that we've also seen within health, particularly when you're dealing with some of your chronic disease cases, which require tracking a patient's interaction over time because you're unable to identify them, or where there is significant migration and they're picking up their service in a different area, it's almost that they have to start afresh. So the community where they're coming from, they went through a number of hoops just to identify themselves, get registered, and start receiving those health services. They migrate to a different community and they have to start overcoming those barriers again. And so that's where the whole essence of digital identity becomes critical. One, for uniqueness, for authentication, but also to be able to provide that continuity of care for each of the citizens, regardless of where they may be. And as we push the whole concept of digitization, one of the key questions that start getting asked is the issue of data security. And you can't really achieve ownership of data for your citizens if you're unable to clearly identify to whom the data belongs, for them to be able to provide the necessary permissions for their data to be shared, for various services to be provided. So when we look at all of these use cases, and there are quite a few of them, but the key thing, as Prof said, is authentication that then allows citizens to access the services which government is providing to them as their right. So inclusivity. For inclusivity purposes, identity is very key. And those are some of the learnings that we've gleaned as we've been implementing health systems in the region.
Thank you for that, Rimbai. There's quite a lot to unpack, and I think we'll certainly come back to that. For those who are with us in the audience, there is a quiz which has just popped up onto your screen, which will ask you which factor do you think is the most important for Zambia's digital ID system. Please do make a choice. I think it will be important for us to be able to get a sense of your thoughts. Now, when we're talking about Zambia systems, Ngoy, I'm coming to you. Could you bring this home? Give us a sense of the work that Zambia is doing across across ID generally, and how we're ensuring that no one is left behind.
Uh, Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Great. So I do agree, first of all, with Vimbai and Professor on the sentiments that they've issued. From where we are sitting, especially from the government side, ID is twofold. As explained by Professor, we're looking at it from a functional perspective, but also a foundational perspective. So in terms of the foundational perspective, our view as government is that every Zambian is an object that has a right to identity. So it's a basic thing that we can expect. And then why we need that, it's a generic sense, but we are also alive to the fact that for government, we see this as an opportunity for effective and efficiency in terms of service provision. So it all boils down to what the government can do for its citizenry in terms of service provision. But beyond the basic description of a given object in this light, we're talking about a human being. We also consider specificity in terms of the use cases. So, as rightly put by the previous speakers, you'll find that your general ID may not may be the single source of truth, but there may be a level of detail that may be required for us to run use case driven programs as government. So you find that beyond the technology, beyond the investment of having a digital ID, the bigger question to government is, what is this for? And the answer still remains, it's for service provision. But services are broadly, even in nature, we can pick services in the social protection space. Vimbai has given an example of the health space where this matters. So we really have come to appreciate the value of a functional ID beyond the best ID. So the best ID, which is your foundational ID, we're saying this is your single source of truth, but beyond it, we need a specialized ID for a given use case. This is good and has proved already in the service provision that government is offering, for example, in the electronic know your customer space, that you could avoid things that are already costly to government, things of double dipping, where social services or the hundreds of services government may be providing to its citizens. You'll find that beyond the normal identification process, beneficiaries could actually be benefiting from several services which they may not be entitled to. We have interesting cases and examples in the patient houses, in the general social protection space, where Ango is getting inputs as a farmer in one sphere and also getting another or benefiting from another scheme within the same agriculture sector, and posing as two different individuals. One, because there's no point to the best ID, but more importantly, there's no use case approach to identifying the functions that come with these beneficiaries. So the long and short of it is, from where we seated, government is interested to create a room for transparency, but more importantly also efficiency and effectiveness in the public service delivery space. Those are my remarks for now.
Absolutely, Ngoya. Certainly appreciate that. I think you talked about service delivery. I've invited as well. Prof had earlier done the same. So we can see that there's value in service delivery, but I'm sure there's additional value, I think, to the holders of these IDs. I think that we can be able to determine. Prof, I'm coming to you on this in terms of these IDs, the foundational, functional. Um, how do we ensure that I'm not walking around with a million IDs that could potentially get lost? We understand the importance of it, but can we make it more efficient?
Yeah, thing is that going back to Yengo's remarks about service delivery, if you really look at the uh, service delivery is targeted. So, for example, if it is old age pension, and the old age is defined as 60 or 65 or 70, depending on the country, you need two data. One is you need to authenticate that this person belongs to my country. and this person is above the age to receive the old age pension. Similarly, if somebody is talking about, say, support to, say, pregnant women, there is some program for providing some support to pregnant women in health, then you need these information beyond the foundational ID, whether they fall into the eligibility register. So normally what is advocated is that you use foundational ID first step and then build a registry. This is called the social registry. In some countries, for example, Ethiopia, some department has been given the responsibility of social registry. In Ethiopia, it is the Ministry of Women and Social Affairs, MAUSA it is called, has been given the responsibility of building social registry. So you can build multiple registry. A farmers registry is being built in Ethiopia. It is being built in some other countries also. A farmers registry, but to first to get into the farmers registry, you need to be identified and authenticated. So you have a foundational ID. I can give you an example of Morocco. Morocco has got a foundational ID in the system known as RNP. But RNP foundational ID is then used to authenticate and create a family ID for 4 programs. One is free medical benefit, another one is subsidy on medical costs, third is a student scholarship, and fourth is a old age pension. And so each 4 registers are created from this family register, saying which family, which member is eligible for what program. So those registers then become important and for example, in Zambia itself, we have been trying with the help of the Smart Zambia Institute and others for the Cash for Work program. Zambia has a Cash for Work program where somebody who is poor and who demands work, the government provides, I think, 10 days or 5 days of work per month or 10 days of work per month and provides that salary or wage for those 10 days to that person so that there is some effect on poverty. This Cash for Work program, which actually creates public works for the country as a whole, we are trying to see that how you can authenticate based on an ID and then build a registry of eligible persons. So that registry building is an important activity, and we have a platform riding on top of the MOSIP ID called Open G2P. That is open government to people. So it is
Right.
any program from government to people social protection. The Open G2P program comes. In fact, Zambia Institute in their system has actually got a sandbox of Open G2P to try it out for a number of social protection or social service delivery program in Zambia. So I think that becomes very important that you have all uh, social delivery program
Yeah.
basically has only 4 components anywhere. One is a registry to be built. Second is from the registry to identify who is eligible, entitlement. And third is actually deliver the entitlement if it is cash through the bank, if it is non-cash material through some other mechanism like medicines or food grains or whatever it is. And the fourth is a grievance redressal because when you want to provide people some benefits, if they does not reach them, there has to be a mechanism to tally and to track and to settle grievances. So if you have these 4 components already installed, you can configure it for any program. So that's
Right.
what we also want to do with Zambia and other countries to say that you have one platform which can then be configured, one for health, one maybe for agriculture, or one maybe for women, one maybe for children, like that. So that's what I want to say. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Prof. I think that really sets light and sheds a lot of light in terms of the work that's happening, including the work that's taking place in Zambia. I'm going to latch onto that particular thread because I think the importance is doubtable. And there's a saying that says, nothing of importance is easy. So, Yuma, I'm coming to you in terms of that, just to get a sense of, with the work that you've done, especially across Health with Smart Care Pro, what are the challenges that you faced? I'm sure the audience would want to know some of those because success doesn't come without its challenges.
So rightly true, Gary. So when we look, and just to provide some context, so in Eswatini, we scaled a single EHR to just over 300 facilities. And there were quite a number of lessons that we learned there, carrying them over to the Zambian context. We've been able to scale a single EHR to just over 1,600 facilities. And working with government and the Ministry of Health is targeting to bring all 3,000 plus government facilities to have the single EHR by the end of next year. But in so doing, there have been a number of critical success factors that I would say that we've picked up upon. Yes, there are challenges, and I think the challenges are well articulated in various meetings and various fora. In this part of the world, there's intermittent supply of power, infrastructure doesn't fully cover or saturate the country, connectivity still remains an issue in some of the hard to reach areas. So, as we've thought about rolling out the EHR, we've realized that in the initial instance, we would just roll out the EHR to the different facilities. But we realized that we were defeating ourselves if we didn't take into cognizance the infrastructure or the rails that are required um, for the EHR to run or the software to run. And as we look at the whole essence or concept of DPI, it's setting up those rails and building blocks upon which different services become available to the different stakeholders, etc. So we kind of borrowed that approach and implemented it. So where as we rolled out the EHR, we would think about connectivity, we would think about power in that particular area and innovative ways in terms of addressing that. So we really had to do an infrastructure reality check in the areas where we were going to ensure that we address those particular areas. The second thing is we also had to think about hardware resilience. When you look at the Zambia landscape and how diverse it is, both in terms of climate, weather, geography, just taking a tablet or taking a digital device out there is not enough because you need to think about sustainability, you need to think about longevity in order for the government to really get a proper return on investment. So we had to think about hardware resilience in terms of the devices that we're rolling out. In that implementation, another key factor, particularly to adoption, was human-centered implementation. So we really moved away from a point where it was us implementing on behalf of government to where
Yes.
we pushed for ownership of the innovation by the community, by the health facilities. One way we did this was by building champions at every level. So community champions, facility champions, district, and up the chain. So we got to a point where we, as an implementing partner, was more of an orchestra conductor, allowing the community themselves to own and drive that innovation. Um, that had a double advantage, one which was ownership, but the other, it was trust through transparency, because what was being done, what was being implemented was clear to everyone at all of those particular levels. So, looking at all of these success factors as the government then begins to push and roll out its program for digitization, these are areas where we feel that private sector partnership can come in to assist the government accelerate its policy, its objectives, and its goals in trying to achieve digital identity. Again, by using private sector partnership, it allows for an agility that the private sector has that government may
Right.
not necessarily have,
Of course.
because even the best laid plans, you haven't thought through everything. And as you begin to implement, certain roadblocks or challenges come up. And when you work hand in hand with the private sector, the government is able to take care of that agility where the private sector can quickly pivot to overcome those challenges and thereby continue to further the agenda of government in providing these services and meeting citizen needs.
No, no, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think that's a comprehensive sense of the work that you had to do across two countries. We have another poll that's come up on our screen. So, in your opinion, who should lead the governance of Zambia's digital identity ecosystem? And the options you have are either government, an independent regulatory body, public-private partnerships, which Mimba has just talked about, or a regional African level body. So please do vote. It'll be great to get your sense of your thoughts around that. Ngoya, I come to you with the same question that I asked Mimbai, because you have the task of implementing this for Zambia. Now, what were these challenges that you faced, and how did you find the impetus to overcome them?
Thanks. So on this side, there have been numerous challenges, starting with some of those highlighted by Vimbai. But maybe one of the unique set of challenges that I've noticed in the entire ecosystem is essentially just a change of mindset. If you look at, for example, in the public service, where I've been for a while now, it's a highly bureaucratic environment. And you have different skill sets, you have different institutions with different legislative mandates and policies that guide or govern their individual institutions, and you want to preach a huge or radical change in the name of digital identity, something that may be relatively a new concept to these. Sometimes they look at you like, oh, what are you trying to do? What are you talking about? And things like that. So from the government side, it's transformation. So we do appreciate that we're moving from one point to another point. So it's been a bit of a challenge moving at the pace that would have imagined. But nonetheless, we've also had the grace to sort of carry on board everyone to preach change. And this is not from a technology viewpoint, but essentially it's a human behavior change challenge that has been thrown against us. And beyond the government itself, this resistance to change sometimes even comes from the beneficiary or the target audience, which may be members of the general public. So beyond policy pronouncements that may be done in the comfort of our offices, I love fieldwork, because when you go on the ground, you will see or hear the weirdest of things. So you're trying to pilot, for example, digital ID because these are biometric enrollments. So you are somewhere in Chama district on the ground, and then when you try to explain the advantages of what efficiencies the service provision will bring, if we have you on the system, they look at you in a funny way. Some will even go religious and tell you this is 666. Why do you want things like that? So these have been real and practical challenges, as well as the technology side, which Vimbai has explained. But the good part is that we've had champions, not just at community level. We have champions through leadership in all structures. It's the chiefs in these places that we've treated as champions, all the way up to the district leadership, the provincial leadership, the national leadership. Our own Republican president is a champion of digitalization, and he'll tell you that the task has been pronounced that he wants a digital economy for Zambia by 2030. And you won't have any digital economy if there's no digital ID. So really, some of these challenges that I've highlighted have been real, and beyond the digital economy we aspire to attain, and IT being at the center of it, we also talk about an issue of sustainability. So many stakeholders, we are partners with different private sector firms, civil society organizations, even donors, and all the parties you can think of across the jurisdiction of Zambia. But with these partnerships come different interests. Vendors have their own interests, investors have their own interests. At the end of the day, we sort of have to come up with a way of realigning everybody to sort of shoot in the same direction. Because for example, for certain cooperating partners, they are looking at impact in a given time frame. What happens to our ecosystem 60 months after a project? Zambia will still be here. The digital ID theme will still be here. So as government, I think we are looking beyond what we have now, and also addressing the challenge that come with support that has sort of a time frame to it. So that in a nutshell is just a few of what we are dealing with, but we are very confident, we are optimistic that we've already hit a high gear, and there's no going back on this one. Thank you.
No, no, absolutely. And we appreciate that high gear and that desire not to go back. And Go, you make a strong point in that when people implement a lot of systems, they forget the human element. And the human element is key for adoption. It's key for inclusion. And so the points that I think you make are very, very strong around those particular elements. Let's get to the nuts and bolts. Prof, as the president of MOSIP, OpenG2P, of course, you're not a stranger to open source systems. And I think there is a big drive, not just in Africa, but across the world, around open source identity frameworks. What are your thoughts around those? Do you think they make sense? Do you think they'll grow?
The why open source first. Forget about identity frameworks. By why open source? What normally happens in any kind of a digital system is that the software becomes important. So if you are using a database and you are using Oracle as your database, the Oracle becomes important for you. And what has happened across the world is both developed and developing countries, north, south, anywhere, is that this dependency on software has led to proliferation of vendor lock. What happens is that if you are used to and you have built your system based on closed source proprietary licensed system, it's fairly difficult even for a advanced country, rich country to get out of that, because the cost of changing is pretty high. So if I am used to Oracle, I have built, let's say, my airline reservation system on Oracle. The cost of moving out of Oracle is so high that I would put up with any kind of difficulty I might have with Oracle as a database. So the idea is that there is a kind of this lock-in that happens. And this lock-in sometimes make life very difficult for the user in some situation. I won't take the name of the country, but the country in Africa, which has been using an ID system for now close to 10 years or more. And that is even before we came into the field. It is vendor based, and It's a vendor-based system, biometric-based, so there is uniqueness, and cards have been issued, numbers have been issued. And what happened is a few years ago is that whenever they wanted to add one more use for ID, where they have to authenticate, like for example, eKYC to open bank account was one use case. Then eKYC to get a SIM card from a telco was another use case. Then maybe they wanted to do one more use case like that. So multiple use cases. So you can imagine that a country might have hundreds of use cases, you know, when especially in service delivery. And for each authentication, each use case, this particular vendor company started charging that country. And that became very, very expensive. And it was not possible to get out of it uh, easily. So they approached us and saying, what do we do? Is it possible to move to open source from this closed source? We said, we need to first check interoperability, whether we could even look at the data from the old system. Can it migrate to a new open source system? Fortunately for that country, it was possible. Even without the cooperation of the vendor, it was possible to buy a very complex application to be developed, which we did, and migration of data could happen. So this is brownfield kind of projects that is now being talked about, where so vendor lock-in was the one major problem with closed source. Another problem with the closed source is that rapidly changing technology and science environment, like for example that you want to leverage, let's say, AI that is now coming up. I am sure there was AI communities are very active in Africa, especially with African languages. In fact, there is a AI Africa summit every year on African language AI. You want to use that African AI language models that has been developed by communities within Africa into your identity system, so people do get much better voice-based, query-based stuff. In a vendor lock-in system, unless the vendor is willing to look at newer technology and something, you won't be able to do it. Whereas if the code is open source and it is under the control of your government and your state and your people, then your university students can take a look at the code, your developers can look at the code and then see, yeah, even if the original code developers do not want to do anything further, I can plug it in here because it is licensed in that fashion that you could always modify, you can add, you can do anything with the code. So this openness has two advantages. One advantage is the technology is owned by the government, so it becomes less expensive than the closed. Second is being open, it gives a capacity to the country to say that, okay, I can now modify, reflect changes in the technology. I can own not only the software, I can own the future path of the software, which is important. Even if you are talking about, let's say, you're very useful, and all of us use software like the Zoom, which we are using today right now. We don't own the future path of Zoom. The future path of Zoom is owned by the Zoom company, and all of us are licensees to that. But if
Absolutely.
you use a open source technology for anything, you also own the future path of the technology, because uh, your people can then start contributing, shaping it, forking it, and then making it as effective as you want it to be. So these are the two major advantages of open source. On the identity system particular, apart from MOSIP, there is no other open source identity system as of now. And
Right.
I can say why is it so? Because identity system is complex. As of now, the total line of code in Mosul is 1.6 million. That is the number of
Wow.
lines of code. So it is because it has so many services, so many modules,
Yeah.
so many things. The documents, I think, for all of them run to more than 10,000 pages. Somebody was telling me the other day, you have got 10,000 page document. I said, yeah, it is because of very complex, but you don't need to read all 10,000 page. Because there is,
Of course.
if you want to simply deploy it and use it, all you need
Mhm.
is only a few understanding of few scripts and doing it. In fact, some students in our institute, without help of anybody, could go from a scratch to a full-scale deployment in a cloud environment in 9 hours. In nine
Oh,
hours, they
that's not.
deployed the entire MOSAIC. So all you need is to do understand the architecture, understand the major features, understand that. The documentation is available because tomorrow, if in Zambia, some developers in the government saying, I want to now modify this for our purpose in this fashion. To give you an
Mhm.
example, there is fairly large amount of interesting work is happening on face authentication.
Right.
In fact, I am told that UK visa regime will move towards electronic and face authentication based one very quickly, from instead of the paper one and an agent verifying whether you are the person. It will become an algorithmic verification as you enter. You submit a selfie, and the system will decide whether allow you into the UK or not. I believe they are working on that. So let's say in Zambia, somebody in the government, especially Smart Zambia initiative, wants to incorporate some form of offline face authentication for provision of service. And they
Mhm.
want to work on that. The code is available, the documentation is available. They are free to use it and make the modification. Not only make the modification, make it also available to other countries.
Right.
It is not only for Zambia. Zambia can claim saying, I have done this, it's working in my country. You can ask Ethiopia, do you want it? You can ask Morocco, do you want it? You can ask Philippines, do you want it? Togo, do you want it? So all the
Yeah.
communities can benefit. So that is the advantage of open source. And that's why we keep all our work. It is not only MOSIP identity, our open
Mhm.
GTP is also in the open. We are currently
Uh-huh.
developing a agricultural platform, including a AI engine called Open Agricultural
That's good.
Network, which is also in the open source completely. And then we are trying to help people in local languages using a certain set of AI tools for translations, etc. That will also be in the open source. So all our work will be in the open source.
No, this is good. We really appreciate that, Prof. And I think open source is certainly the way to go. We do have another poll within the chat, which says which existing system should be most urgently integrated into Zambia's digital ID layer. We have NEMA for health insurance, EKYC for financial services, Smart Care for health, and then we've got civil registration for births and deaths. So while we are on that, and with those options that we've been given, Goya, I come to you. How do we integrate these systems? NEMA, EKYC, SmartCare, to enable Zambia's identity layer. And is open source the way to go as well? Please feel free to delve into that as well.
Thank you so much. So I'll start with the last one on the open source. I do agree with Professor's sentiments. One of our key things that we've looked at critically really is sort of establishing safeguards around open source. So even at a global stage, when you chat with our colleagues at the United Nations responsible for digitalization in the office of the Secretary General, they'll tell you safeguards are the way to go because of how governments are structured. So when you hear words open source, your decision makers are thinking free. It's not. I like how carefully Professor brought this out. He'll tell you for a fact that it's less expensive, but it's not free. So you have, from where we sit as government, you have competing needs. So it's an issue of capacity. Country X will say we are on open source and we've done this in 6 months. You're looking at the pool of expertise that you have. You need to build capacity in certain corners that would matter to implement what is being proposed. So these are some of the thoughts that we have to. And in an era where we have competing needs, energy, you have issues. I think just the last season or the other season, we had a drought in Zambia. You may even have budget lines shifting in as much as we have a very supportive government in terms of digitalization or the digital transformation strategy in Zambia. We still find ourselves struggling in certain areas in so far as resource allocation is concerned. But again, glad to announce that this is where partnerships really make sense, because in this system or in this digitalization space, you have a lot of support, a lot of ideas that are coming from across the table where the partners are seated. And then when it comes to the other part that was raised in terms of integration, I think all of them from the vital statistics viewpoint. You can talk about death and birth registrations. We need that. Insurance, we need that. EKYC for financial inclusion or for financial management, we also needed that. So which one takes precedence? I would want to just go ambitious and say we onboard everything at a go. But also what we are trying to cure as the e-government division in Smart Zambia is the policy side of things, also the legislative side of things, because you'll find that institutions are very highly structured, some of whose mandates are actually drawn right from the acts of parliament, and they'll tell you that these are the do's and the don'ts. So when we talk about interoperability and integration, again, I'm quick to run away from the technical side of things. Technology, I think, is the easier part. Think about the ability to interoperate, think about the ability to integrate, but then you have pieces of legislation that outrightly spells out that you are not able to do that. You're then forced to go back into, someone was saying, can't we do this within the week? I was saying it's a process, it's an internal process, because revisions, amendments of these laws need to go back to parliament. That could take 3 years from now. And this is the frustration that you get from players within these different sectors. But we are happy because the division of Smart Zambia, again, is uniquely placed because it's sitting in the presidency. You then have willpower to go to the Ministry of Justice or Attorney General of Zambia and say, look, there are laws that are impeding the digital transformation agenda for the government. So you list them, and they have the convening power to bring together different institutions so that we sort of come out all the bottlenecks and the roadblocks, so that these integrations that you're speaking about are much seamless than we imagine. Again, the worry has never been on the technology side, because if you told our technical teams to say run and start integrating, like we have a formal partnership with MOSIP, I think we've had a number of engagements at the technical level. That's not where the problem is. Talk about finance, talk about legal policy and legislative interoperability. Those are the real issues from where I'm seated. One of the picks that I like from our professor's presentation is, for us, open source is the way to go, including the standards aspect. Will tell you that even the vendors that we are sort of courting now, the issue of open standards is an issue, because we have been victims of vendor locking. We have been victims of taking approaches that are non-sustainable. So at this point, I think we are very much interested to go with the rest of the world and to preach the openness in terms of system uptake. And perhaps just as I conclude in my remarks, it's also very important to realize that at the end of the day, we want the same thing. But again, we are not leaving the social aspect behind, because we need a shift in mind for these things to work. And remember, for this kind of growth in the digital space, in the eGov space, it's unprecedented. It's still a concept that we've never really broken down to everybody else. So we are actively engaging in terms of sensitization of what it is we're trying to do in the public service. Those are my submissions.
And I appreciate that, Goy, and thank you so much for such a comprehensive response. Women, coming to you as more or less a systems integrator, bringing together these open source systems and making them a reality onto the ground, together with the partnership with the owners of the, or at least the developers of the systems and the government. What's your experience in a minute or two?
Echoing the words of Ngoe, that when it comes to the technology, it's not really an issue when it comes to integrating the systems. We recently did a POC with MOSIP and Smart Zambia, where we integrated Smart Care with EKYC as part of an authentication layer. And that was something that was easily done in a couple of weeks with the various development teams and stakeholders working together. But as Ngoy rightly put it, you have the legislation and the social change that needs to happen and take place to then allow these things to happen. But I think also that's where the beauty of DPI comes in, because DPI is building blocks.
Yeah.
One example that is usually given of DPI is, think about it in terms of the roads and the dams that we have, the railway lines that we had. When these were initially built and invested upon, the legislation in terms of how the various services or commerce or transportation that would take place on these rails came much, much later, but the building blocks were built. And as opportunities were presented by the fact that these rails were available, then the various stakeholders responsible for governance and policy began to move along and start putting those things in place. So as we look at these with open source, it allows the communities to develop the building blocks, to start building these rails. Even as Ngoye said, government is still working on policy, legislation, and governance frameworks to govern and change this. It's usually difficult to work on policy for something that is theoretical that you haven't seen. So with these POCs and these building blocks, I think one example is the way AI has run ahead in terms of legislation the world over. And we can think about it in much the same way. But I think implementing the core principles, federated databases, data ownership, trust infrastructure, putting these building blocks in place as the other track around policy and governance continues to move at its pace is equally important. And that's what we
Yes.
have been doing within health, within finance, within the different sectors. We've just started putting together these building blocks for a digital identity so that once the policy and legislation is in place, and as Ngoye said, the running
Mhm.
becomes a lot.
Absolutely. No, no, thank you for that. As we get to the tail end of our discussion, Wimbai, I stay with you in 30 seconds. If you could give our audience a parting shot.
Um, in 30 seconds, we live in an ever-changing world. I think various things have come to show us that the days in which the world changes over a period of time are gone. It's sudden, shifts momentous. And DPI and DPG allows us to have those building blocks that allow us to pivot. As Prof said, by using open standards, you own the future. You don't have to wait for the proprietary's priority to align with what you need to do. Once you have your own alignment in terms of where you want to go, you can quickly pivot. And where you have your public-private sector partnerships, it helps you overcome the challenges around legislation as the private sector can pivot and push the bounds of innovation based on your priorities as other elements are put together for implementation and scale up.
Thank you very much for that, Wimbai. Goya, come to you. You've got your 30 seconds just to give the audience some final words.
Thank you so much. So mine is just to reiterate that I think it's a great time to live and be a Zambian. So we are very optimistic. What we believe in is what Vimba has just said. We sing about it from the Smart Zambia perspective that innovations, the drivers are actually the private sector. So government has unprecedented levels of partnership in the e-governance space now, more than ever before. We are looking forward and beyond the boundaries of Zambia. We are also a regional force in that e-governance really is the core of the day in public service delivery for Zambia. So it's go all the way forward. Thank you.
I love the optimism and I love the fact that we're seeing this from the mountaintops. Prof, I come to you for your 30 minutes to round it up. 30 seconds, apologies.
See, my point is fairly simple, that we need to look at these things on a sustainability viewpoint, because an identity once issued should be useful 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line. Similarly with anything else. And how do we sustain this digital government over a period of time? Whatever be the technological changes, whatever be the changes in the policy environment, but the infrastructure, the thing has to be sustained. So how do we bring in that sustainability in this? And the only way the sustainability can be brought in by taking the ownership of the digital governance and making it transparent and open, so that the citizens, the students, the teachers, the others within the country can start contributing and maintaining it. That knowledge to keep it going, the knowledge to upgrade it, the knowledge to do that. Unless that knowledge is within the society, it is not sustainable. So I would wish Zambia move towards that kind of a sustainability also. They have great, in Zambia Institute, they have got a great technological team. We have seen it ourselves. We have seen how they, and IHM is a great private sector participant in this. But this has to move out of these organizations into the society as a whole, so that it is possible for any university, for any startup, for any other company to say, yeah, I am also can keep it going, keep it sustained. So I would just urge that Smart Zambia keeps sustainability as a goal. And we are also completely concerned with safeguards of digital governance, and we are signatories to the UN safeguards. And we are actually releasing a report on 16th of September. 16th of
Right.
September is the International Digital ID Day. So 16th of September, we are releasing a report on how closely MOSIP complies with all the features that have been, all the safeguards that have been announced by the UN. There are 42 safeguards on that, and out of it, 33 applies to identity, and we complied with 32 of the 33 safeguards already, even before that thing. So the safeguards are important, and we need to keep in mind the safeguards while making things sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Prof. And thank you all, Prof. Vimba and Ngoy. You've been a great group of panelists, and it's been a good discussion. This is part two of a four-part series where we're taking a look at Zambia's digital transformation journey. Now that we've discussed in terms of how we can identify who you are, the next question becomes, how can we pay you? So the next session will be taking a look at payments, and we'll be taking a look at how we can make those interoperable, how we can make them inclusive, and how we can make sure that they work for the people. So I'll just say thank you to the audience, thank you to the panelists. It's always great to connect, and we look forward to the next session. Have yourselves a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.